All right, let's go ahead and move on to pressing movements, specifically the overhead press. And today we're going to talk about two separate pressing movements, the overhead press and the bench press. And you'll notice a lot of similarities between these two. We're going to talk about wrist extension, how we should grab the bar, bracing, how these lifts kind of break the rules just a little bit when it comes to spine position. So you'll notice a lot of similarities, but there are particular nuances that are going to be quite a bit different between these two lifts. Let's go ahead and get into it with performance points. Now, the first performance points I want to go over is going to be wrist extension, something that takes place so heavily in the bench press and overhead press, where people very lackadaisically just jam themselves under the barbell, go into massive wrist extension, and then just settle and maintain this position. We have to understand that joint centration very much matters, and your ability to transfer force optimally is predicated on the fact that we have some semblance of a stacked position. Now, keep in mind, stacked or neutral of a wrist position is not synonymous with straight. Just like we talk about spine position neutrality, there's a little bit of a range that we could talk about here, right? So I'm not talking about perfectly straight up and down. This is neutral. This is neutral. There's a range that we can actually play with, but we want to be within the range of neutral rather than jamming ourselves into massive wrist extension, which is going to hurt our ability to be stable and to transfer force optimally.
Yeah, the thing I like to add to grip with the bar, let's make sure we're not incorporating new injuries. I actually had some elbow tendonitis flare up, and I don't know what caused it. I was hitting the heavy bag and doing some other weird stuff, and I was training triceps really, really hard after not training them that hard, and this elbow got really angry with me. Now, I know we're talking wrists, but bear with me here. Similar to a squat, we want to pay attention to the feet in the squat as we talk, so all of a sudden we don't develop a knee issue. It was really frustrating talking to Coach Alex and be like, man, I don't know what I did with my elbow. I feel like my body's falling apart. I just had spine surgery. I've been out from competition for 8 months now at this point in time. It's actually coming up on a year now from the initial onset of the injury. And then all of a sudden my elbow, my knee, my hip. So take this as an opportunity to make sure our lifts are getting more better developed with skill acquisition, and we use this to kind of rebuild the body because there can be some aches and pains elsewhere that are lingering. We start pushing our pressing because we can press obviously with more frequency than we can squat and deadlift right now, and these other little things will pop up. The second thing to note with that is wrist wraps. If you're an athlete who's used to wearing wrist wraps, power lifters, weight lifters, CrossFitters, strongman, and you get in the habit of tightening your wrist wraps to help you in this position, the position Brandon said not to be in, there's a cast holding this in place, so it's kind of okay. But this leads to issues here that lead to issues here. Take this opportunity to clean this up. If you're wearing wraps, remember to find your neutral position. Make that cast with the wrap, lock it in, so you're still relying on some strength in your body to hold alignment, and then you cast it up versus being in a bad position and using your cast as a Band-Aid. Cool. Let's jump on to walking out like a squat. So Brandon, if you grab the bar here for me, and I'm going to have you do a bad example of unracking this however you'd like. We see all kinds of problems here with the unrack and the walkout of an overhead press. We would love to teach you one skill that you can carry across between multiple lifts. So how do I use my overhead press to make my squat better? And how do I use my squat to make my overhead press better? Some of you might be scratching your head like, what is this dude talking about? If you've been through the squat setup already, you remember 3 steps. Let's see it. So performance point, make sure our alignment's still there. We're teaching alignment everywhere. We dip underneath, we stand tall. 1 step hold. 2nd step hold. 3rd step if you need more width. If not, you're already there in 2. From here, we can execute the press. And it looks very similar actually to a back squat, except he's holding the bar up here. So make sure that while you're walking yourself out, or if you're seated, we're not just going to be in a bad position and unrack into position. Think about your alignment like you would any other time weight is stacked up around your shoulders and how that affects you from an axial loading or top-down loading perspective. Anything to add to that walkout in the overhead press?
Yeah, more than anything, we want our upper body position to stay absolutely stable. This is a really big common occurrence when it comes to overhead press, or people will be shifting around a lot. We really want to take our time prior to unracking. Stabilize as much as possible. And as we walk out, make it almost a game where how little can your elbow, wrist, barbell, how little can you have these structures move? The less, the better when it comes to the walkout, as stable as possible in that upper body. Now let's go ahead and transition to talk about the thoracic extension piece of this. Now when it comes to extension in the overhead press, we really want to minimize how much comes from the lumbar and maximize how much comes from the thoracic. Now this is another really big similarity between this and bench press. And again, we're going to get a little outside of the rules here. Once you know the rules, you can break them a little bit, because when it comes to these pressing movements, some extension in the spine, even a little bit outside of the range of neutral, is perfectly okay due to it being a different movement, a different force vector, all that good stuff there. So we really want to minimize how much comes from the lumbar spine. There'll be some, but the more we can actually facilitate kind of in the TL junction and above, the better. So we're really going to focus on, as I'm getting into an unracked position, I'm going to set a brace, pack my head, press my collarbones back into the bar if I was in a back squat position. And I'm going to try to get as much of it to come from that thoracic upper segments of my spine possible, because a lot of people, the biggest mistake they make in the overhead press as well as the bench is 100% of it is coming in that lumbar area. That lumbopelvic portion of your body is the only thing that's going through the totality of extension.
Yeah. In the extension of our pressing motions, again, to highlight, try to make as much as you can come from here. And if we can use head like a Pez dispenser, and you'll see in about 50% of weightlifters, that's ideal, because now we don't have to get our body out of the way if the bar's under our chin and we can find extension and looking up to make move. Now we need less extension through our entire spine. It's also really important to note that as we go through different drills in pressing, they should be the same, right? If we look at, snatch balance or behind the neck presses from a wide grip, things shouldn't really change much. It's actually harder when we go over the front. So whether we're talking dumbbell setup, and again, a lot of more details on this in program. When we get to a barbell behind the neck, in front of the head, different hand placements, everything should be the same. The only time that really changes is when we get a massive log and we have to take the log off the floor. My purpose to this is do not deviate the spine. If we know we need to come into a little bit of extension, I can unrack in a good position, I can walk out, and the only difference now needs to be, right, under the bar, little extension. I'm braced though, I walk out, I go to press, little bit here, nothing massive has changed. If I go from a log from the floor, I might be rounded a little bit to get it into my lap to then curl it up. That sport demand is a little bit different. Bigger log, I have to get more out of the way. There's a little bit of deviation. It's one of the dangers of it, one of the fun complexities of the sport. You have to know where to implement that in your programming all the way from the ground. But if we're not with a log, which most of us are not, please don't round, get into position, and then have deviation through the lift. That is a recipe for disaster. So next, Brandon, we're talking about finish position, correct?
Absolutely.
So ideally, you've already seen one of the drills from Dr. Snell about our overhead pressing from the back. How we get to it is here 90-90 right over the spine. I don't suggest resting a barbell or tapping a barbell on your head, but as you're warming up, maybe grab a PVC stick and remind yourself where directly over your head is. If you're not looking on video, a lot of athletes forget this with tight shoulders. If I relax a little bit here, I really feel like this is over my head. But if I was to drop it, it's obviously not over my head. For those of you who are super bendy, this is also not over your head. Notice I came to a snatch grip position and had to jam my head forward to even get here. But we have to understand where overhead is. If we're coming braced from a behind the head press, we need to finish directly here. If we're coming from a press position, unrack, walk out, we need to get things out of the way so it's not a giant arc. And we need to finish over our head. because the farther I get out in front of me, the shear force is now pulling my low back. You'll feel your electors light up, and your delts for sure. Holding this is gonna be extra heavy. I'm not getting optimal loading over my body, so I'm not even gonna lift as much. If I have the mobility to be able to get back here, you can see what happens to a lot of us. I immediately arch, and the risk of me dumping a barbell behind my back and coming into massive extension that actually hurt a little bit just doing that is not something I want to do under load. Anything to add to that position, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and pass this bad boy here. So when it comes to getting over the top of you, this is also pretty important, or can be pretty important when it comes to start position as well. But there's a little bit of nuance here. When it comes to somebody that maybe has some extension tolerance, actually Kyle's a pretty good example of that right now, and maybe is in an injured state, this is a little less important. It's more of a true performance point that we're talking about. Because when you look at the best overhead pressers in the world, they are very good at starting with their barbell positioning being practically directly over the top of them. They have to be to handle heavier load. If you look at our strongman coach Joe, for example, he's not starting way the hell out here. Instead, he's getting this bad boy on top of him at the start. But again, there's a little bit of discrepancy or context to this discussion, depending upon where you are in the recovery process. But we want this to be fairly on top of you. So the way I like to put it is you should have to go through what I like to call the double chin maneuver to get out of the way of the bar, even at the start, and have even a little bit extension that thoracic spine to get more on top of us in the beginning, and this is going to create a more advantageous start position that'll allow you to handle quite a bit more load.